The best dominants don't start off feeling dominant. They overthink themselves, second guess, and wonder if they're even cut out for this. But confidence isn't about barking orders, it's about presence. And a submissive can feel when their dom doesn't trust themselves. I'm Alessandra from Domsive Living, and today I'll show you how to step into your role with certainty without faking it. Welcome to the Domsive Living podcast. Now, if you're totally new to being a dom or you just want to improve, I've got you. You can grab my free How to Be a Good Dom Quick Start Guide and get the essential steps to take control, build trust, and lead your submissive. Download it now at domsiveliving.com/dominant. I'll have a link for it in the description too. But to master confidence as a dom, you really need to understand the power of dominance. So what is dominance really? Well, people assume that being a dominant means being aggressive or loud or demanding. But the truth, dominance is about leadership, trust, and presence. So think about the most compelling leaders. Are they the loudest in the room or the ones who hold themselves with this quiet certainty? I'm sure you know by now, if you've been listening to the podcast, that I am a huge Star Wars nerd. I'm always dropping little references here and there. But when I think of a confident, commanding leader, I just always think of Darth Vader. He doesn't yell, he doesn't rush, he just stands there literally and just breathes. That's like pretty much what he does, and he just really owns the room, and he's just so powerful. Everyone's always afraid to be around him. Not that a dom wants their sub to be afraid, but he is just so commanding, and it just really shows that true power is in presence, not in the volume. So I just always think of Darth Vader when I think of a confident dom. But let's talk about the different expressions of dominance. So there's this misconception that there's only one way to be a dominant, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. The reality is that dominance has different styles, and finding your own style is key to confidence. So we're not looking for this cookie cutter dom that you need to be. So the different types of dominance out there, there's playful dominance. So this can, be a dominant who likes to do things like teasing. They can be really lighthearted, have kind of this flirty control about them. These are some of the more caregiver roles, so like daddies or mommies. And then there's more of these commanding dominance. So these are the Darth Vaders. So these are the really firm ones. They're really decisive. They're very structured. And then there's sensual dominance too. So these can be controlled also, but they're, really deeply intimate, and they're about pleasure. And then there's primal or intense dominance. They can be raw, really instinctive in their power exchange. And your role as a dominant can change over time. I've shared before how my dom used to think he had to be intense all the time, but when he really embraced the balance of playfulness and control, his confidence just really skyrocketed because he was being more natural and didn't feel like he was having to fit into this mold. So, think about all these styles that I just mentioned and think about which one resonates with you the most. But let's now talk about the foundation of a confident dominant. So a submissive really needs stability, and if you as the dominant are second guessing, your submissive will too. And I have a story to kind of go along with this that I'm sure you can relate to too. So recently I had gotten an Uber, and I could tell that the driver I got, that they weren't a confident driver. They knew how to drive, but they just weren't confident. I mean, that feeling when the person who's driving you, they're just hesitant about how they merge, they maybe slam on the brakes too hard. And this person was just kind of like second guessing each of their turns, and it was just making me a nervous wreck. So I kind of just started like gripping the side of the door. I was leaning over and checking the intersections for them, seeing if cars were going. I was even doing that thing where you press on the imaginary brake pedal with my foot because deep down, I just didn't really trust that this person was in control. And dominance is the exact same way. If a dominant hesitates, if they don't trust themselves, the submissive will feel it. And it's just like being in a car with a nervous driver. It's harder to relax and let go. But when a dominant is completely sure of themselves, when they give clear and consistent direction, that's when the submissive can feel safe, and that's when the real power exchange can happen, because then the sub can just let go. So now you understand the power of dominance, but confidence in dominance isn't about knowing everything. It's about being willing to lead and learn. So how do you do that? So there's three steps really to cultivate your dominant presence. So step one is to know yourself first. Before you lead, you need self awareness. So ask yourself, what kind of dominant do I want to be? What excites me about control and power exchange? And what are, your soft limits as a dom? And if you don't know these things, one thing you can do is to journal. A lot of times we think journaling is just for subs, but dominants can journal too, so they can get their thoughts on paper, and it just really helps to solidify their confidence. So I really encourage doms to journal too. So, step two is to set clear expectations. So, confidence really grows when you define what you expect. So, if you tell your sub, just do whatever or do whatever you want, that really creates uncertainty for them. But if you say, here's what I want and here's what I expect, then you start to project confidence. So, another example is if you're in a scene and you're saying, maybe you could kneel now. That's like really hesitant and unsure. But if you just tell them kneel, that's really simple, direct, and confident. So you see the difference there. It's kind of just how you word things. And step three is to respect limits while holding authority. So there's that misconception that a lot of new doms have where they think that confidence means being forceful or even being a jerk. But a confident dominant really listens, they respect boundaries, and they lead with assurance too. And sometimes I'll hear a dom say, well, what if I set an expectation and the submissive doesn't, do it, or they hesitate a little bit? But you don't want to back down in those instances, because a confident dom will really hold space for their sub's emotions even when they are hesitating, but they'll still reinforce that dynamic. And I have a personal experience with this. So my dom has the rule where I send them daily check-in messages about how I'm feeling, but there was one day a couple weeks ago where I just didn't really feel like opening up. And so I sent a really short, vague response to my dom instead. And he noticed right away and he said, why did you hesitate? Why, didn't you send me the messages like you usually do? And so I admitted that I didn't really feel like being vulnerable and opening up that day. And, he acknowledged it and he said, I understand, but I still want you to check in. It's important to me. And he asked me to try again. So he held space for my emotions, but he didn't let me off the hook either. So that's something that dominance can do. So maybe go back and think of a time where you struggled with setting expectations. What's one thing maybe you wish you did differently, and then be resolved to make those changes in future situations. But so now you know how to cultivate your dominant presence. So let's move on to how to communicate your desires with confidence. So you need to speak with authority. So confidence is really felt. It's felt through tone, pacing, and certainty. So some simple tweaks you can do is just to lower your tone slightly when you give commands, really slow down, don't rush. You can even use silence to create impact. A lot of times my Dom will just give me that look and he won't say anything, and that just goes a long way. But I had a student once who used to ramble when they would give instructions to their submissive and kind of go into the ins and whys and, I want you to do this, but if, it's too hard for you, maybe you can do something else. And it's like they just kept rambling and rambling. But now instead, they really pause, they let their words settle, and his sub has told me that she can really feel the difference now. So be really controlled with your speech. And I know a lot of DOMs kind of confuse assertiveness with aggressiveness. So assertiveness is really clear, it's respectful, it gives the sub direction, but aggressiveness is really loud, it's forceful, and it's reactive, and it is just very negative. So, an example of saying something in an assertive way could be, I want you to do this because it pleases me. But to say something in an aggressive way is just kind of like barking an order and just saying, do it now. So there's no care behind it. And a lot of times I have dominants ask me, well, do DOMs still be polite? Do they still say thank you? Can they still say please? And yes, you can still be assertive and polite. And I think, the flip side is being aggressive and just demanding, and that in a way almost makes you look weaker. And then another tip to really build confidence is to be an active listener. Because I think a lot of times weak DOMs, they interrupt or they just dismiss their submissive needs when they're voicing them. So confident DOMs really actively listen and they respond with a lot of certainty. Because have you ever noticed that the most dominant people that kind of give that off, that they don't rush to speak, they really listen first, they listen attentively? That's confidence. And an example of someone who I think does this really well is Keanu Reeves. I don't know if you've ever seen Keanu Reeves in an interview, but he doesn't rush to answer. You can see him really thinking and taking his time. And then he responds really calmly and confidently. And I think a great dominant, this really does the same. They don't need to rush to prove a point. They just are able to, have control. So now that you know how to communicate your desires with confidence, let's talk about projecting dominance through body language. So here are my biggest body language hacks for just instant confidence. So number one, you probably know I'm going to say this, but posture. So stand tall, have your shoulders back, eye contact. This is like a really good hack. So don't be the first to look away, especially if you have a brat and they're trying to mess with you, hold their gaze. You don't need to stare them down, but just look them in the eye and don't always be the first to look away. And then try not to fidget. I know this is easier said than done, but just, being calm and even in your tone, like I said, don't ramble, but just being really deep and controlled and not feeling rushed. Because confidence isn't about filling the silence, it's about owning the silence. So if you say, come here, and then you pause, they'll feel your control more than if you just rush through that and keep, saying, I said, come here, you need to come here now. Just say it once and pause and see what they do. But another hack I have too, if you have a hard time, being taller than your submissive, is to have your submissive sit lower than you. So have them either sit on a chair when you're talking to them or kneel on the floor. Just always trying to be physically above your sub can kind of just help you to embody more confidence too. And that goes for during scenes too. So, having your submissive lower than you, but also you can do things like circling around your partner really slowly, especially if you're doing impact play before you're doing the actual impact, just really taking your time, either circling them while you're walking around or circling that area of their body with your hands. That just really builds suspense and it just reinforces that power dynamic. And when you are touching them, have that really firm, purposeful touch that just really shows physical dominance. But to really bring home the point of body language, I'm sorry, I'm going to make another Star Wars reference, but think of young Luke Skywalker in episode 4, where he's really just whiny. He always has his head down, he's always fidgeting, he's always complaining. But oh man, in episode 6, this is my second favorite Star Wars episode, mostly because of Slave Leia, probably. But in episode 6, he is a Jedi and he just stands really calm. He speaks and moves really deliberate, and he's just way more confident. So think about whatever character or celebrity really inspires you as a dominant, and just try to model and embody that in your practice. But besides body language, your transformation really needs to be about embracing your inner power. So, really working on your mindset that can really help shift things so you become a more confident Dom. So, instead of thinking, am I doing this right? What does my sub think? What do other people think? You need to refocus it as, does this feel right to me? Once you're more in tune with yourself and you're more mindful, it'll just project that confidence. So, some action steps to help you master the mindset of a confident Dom is to have a few daily confidence habits. So, this sounds corny, but practice speaking a command to yourself in the mirror every day. Just one simple command. You can change it every day, something you want to work on and maybe tell your sub later, but just really practice saying it in the mirror can really help. And then just work on adjusting your tone and body language, even when you're just talking with, other people, even at work or at the grocery store. And watch how you feel when you slow down your words. I swear it'll just help you feel more confident as a person. But focus on learning and taking in as much knowledge as you can as a Dom, but also don't get stuck in the paralysis of analysis either, because confidence isn't about knowing everything. It's about trusting yourself to figure it out. And confidence isn't something you're born with either. It's something you build, and the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. So you have to put in the reps. You have to be a dominant. A lot of times I hear Doms say that, well, when I get a partner, then I will work on being a better Dom, or, when I start doing scenes, then I'll start, honing my skills as a Dom. But really, the time to master these skills and really become the best Dom you can be is now. So don't wait for some future opportunity to come its way. In fact, when you work on being the best Dom you can be now, you will attract the right submissive for you. But remember, if you're totally new to being a Dom or you just want to improve, I've got you. You can grab my free How to Be a Good Dom quick start guide and get the essential steps to take control, build trust, and lead your submissive. So you can download that now at domsubliving.com/dominant, and I'll have a link for it in the description too. But I'd love to hear from you. So drop a comment below and tell me what's one area of dominance you want to grow in. If you found this helpful, definitely subscribe and check out my other episodes on how to be a good Dom to take your dominance even further. But until next time, keep embracing your power and pleasure through Dom subliving.